Hi, welcome back to the Listen Up Girl podcast, your daily LGBTQ plus news podcast. I'm your host, Zach Ramos-Friedman, and we have a lot to get into today. It's been one of those news weeks where we almost want to put the phone down, but you can't, because staying informed is how we stay powerful. So grab your coffee, your tea, your Monday beverage of choice, and let's get into it. Here's everything you need to know as we start this week. First, White House labels pro-trans group as terrorist threats. We are going to lead the biggest story of the week because this is one that is not okay and it cannot be overstated. The Orange Convicted Felons White House has released its 2026 National Counterterrorism Strategy, a 16-page document, and buried right in there alongside with drug cartels and Islamist terrorist groups is language targeting what documents call radically pro-gender transgender organizations. The strategy vows to prioritize, and I quote, the rapid identification and neutralization of violent secular political groups whose ideology is anti-American, radically pro-gender, and radically pro-gender. It goes on to say the government will use law enforcement tools to cripple them operationally. Now, let me be clear about what this means. The federal government of the United States is now officially categorizing pro-transgender as a political national security threat. The document leans on and killing the conservative commentator Charlie Kirk, where the administration ties what it calls extreme transgender ideology to justify this framing. Advocacy organizations and journalists have pushed back hard, noting that data does not support the claim that transgender people are disproportionately responsible for political violence. The Trans Journalists Association's has published a rebuttal on their website. Civil rights advocates are sounding every alarm they have. When the government decides who counts as radical and that definition gets to include anyone they don't like, the implications of the entire community are devastating. This is a story we'll continue to follow closely and bring you more updates as they become available. Next, 740 anti-trans bills under consideration across the country. And while we're on the subject of legislation assault on our community, let's talk about numbers because they are staggering. Trans Legislation Tracker, which monitors bills across the country, is currently tracking 740 anti-trans bills under consideration across 42 states and at the federal level. That's in 2026 alone, not counting the bills that carried over from prior sessions. At the federal level, there are 113 bills in play in the current Congress, something that simply did not exist just a few years ago. Education and healthcare bills make up roughly half of everything being considered. We're talking about bills that deny students the right to use correct name and pronouns in school, bills that would forcibly out trans students to their parents, and expand bans on transgender affirming care. That is supported by every major medical association in this country. The ACLU is tracking this in real time, and you can find their full tracker at aclu.org. The good news, and yes, there is good news, advocates have historically defeated about 92% of the anti-LGBTQ plus bills every year. That's because people who work show up, call the representatives, and refuse to keep silent. So we need to keep doing that. Next, Pete Buttigieg fires back at the Orange Convicted Felons administration. So let's talk about our forever gay icon, Pete Buttigieg, who has been absolutely unhinged in the best way on social media this week, and I am so here for it. The Orange Convicted Felons administration has been blaming Buttigieg, along with Joe Biden and Senator Elizabeth Warren, for the shutdown of Spirit Airlines, which, by the way, closed because jet fuel prices have more than doubled in the first 4 months of 2026 due to the war in Iran. That's what Spirit Airlines itself said, but the administration has told a different story. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy went on Fox News to blame Democrats, and Pete Buttigieg did not hold back. He summed it all up in 6 words. It's an extraordinary show of weakness. He followed that up by posting, and I'm paraphrasing here, that they cannot lower gas prices by blurting out names of a few Democrats. He also made the broader point that when we are deep into the second year of office, if your flex is still to blame the previous administration, it says something about where you are as a leader. Pete Buttigieg out there doing what he does, and I just love to see it. Our next story is Beanie Feldstein is pregnant and the internet is thriving. So we need a moment of joy, and this is it. Actress Beanie Feldstein, known best for Booksmart and The Lady Bird, announced this week that she and her wife, British producer Bonnie Chance Roberts, are expecting a baby. The couple shared the news on Instagram with the caption, "Limited edition Beanie Baby coming soon," complete with photos of the white cake with pink ribbons. The internet absolutely lost its mind in the best way. Celebrities flooded the comments. Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt star Uzo Aduba wrote on, "Oh my goodness, congratulations you two. What a beautiful growing family." And out Broadway star Ben Platt, who knows something about queer joy, wrote simply, "Their universe is healing. Queer families are families, and seeing queer love celebrated loudly and joyfully, especially right now, is everything." Our next story is not surprising. Gay believers are leaving the church in record numbers. The next story is one that hits deeply for a lot of people in our community because so many of us grew up in faith traditions that were anything but welcoming. A new report this week highlighted data showing that more gay and LGBTQ plus believers are leaving religious institutions than ever before. Data from the Williams Institute at UCLA confirms that nearly 2/3 of LGBTQ plus people who were raised Christian have now left the faith. According to the Public Religion Research Institute, nearly half of all of the people who have religious tradition cite their church's negative teaching about LGBTQ plus people as a key reason. Among people under 30 who have left religion, the numbers jumps to 60%. 60% of young Americans who walked out of the door did so, at least in part, because of anti-LGBTQ plus teaching. The story this week highlighted personal accounts like Monty Bennett, a student of a Southern Baptist College in Tennessee, who described a professor comparing being gay to having cancer of the soul. When that is the message your spiritual home is sending you, it's no wonder people are leaving. The fastest growing religion's identification in America right now is none. And for many queer people, the journey out of organized religion is not easy. It means loss of community, loss of family connections, and spiritual identity that has to be completely rebuilt. To anyone going through that right now, you are not alone, and there's absolutely a world of queer spirituality, chosen family, and community waiting for you on the other side. You just got to look for it. Next, Supreme Court rules against Colorado's conversion ban therapy. This story has major implications for LGBTQ youth people across the country, and it demands your attention. The Supreme Court of the United States ruled against Colorado's law banning so-called conversion therapy for minors, siding with licensed counselors who argued the state's ban violated their First Amendment right to free speech. The court's majority framed the issue as one of protected speech between a therapist and a client. Conversion therapy, let's be clear, what this is a discredited and harmful practice that attempts to change someone's sexual orientation or gender identity. Every major medical and psychological organization in the country, including the American Medical Association and American Psychological Association, has condemned this as ineffective and deeply harmful, with increased rates of depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation in LGBTQ youth. The ruling opens the door for conversion therapy to be practiced in states that have had it banned and sends a message to vulnerable queer and trans people that the court is willing to prioritize a therapist's rights over a child's well-being. Advocates are calling it a devastating step backwards, and the fight to protect LGBTQ youth from this practice will now have to move to the state level. Unbelievable. Next, the IOC bans transgender women from the Olympics. This one is coming for a while, but it still lands as a gut punch. The International Olympic Committee has agreed to a new athlete eligibility policy that effectively bans transgender women from competing in women's events at the Olympics. The policy limits eligibility to biological females determined by genetic screening, beginning with the 2028 Games. This decision follows years of pressure from anti-trans sports advocates who was influenced by part of the political decision made in the U.S. and elsewhere. LGBTQ plus rights organizations have condemned the policy, calling it discriminatory and noting that transgender women have competed in the Olympics without incident. For transgender athletes who have trained their entire lives to compete on the world stage, this is not just a policy, it's a message. It's the IOC telling transgender women that they do not belong. And we see you, though, and we believe in you, and we know we need to fight to get this fixed, and this is far from over. Here's another story that I spoke about a couple of months ago. 2 gay Iranian men face deportation and possible execution. Our final story is a story that is urgent and heartbreaking. 2 gay Iranian men who are currently seeking asylum in the United States are facing deportation. And if they are sent back to Iran, they could face execution. Iran criminalizes homosexuality under its interpretation of the Sharia law, and gay men have been executed under that law. The Orange Convicted Felons Administration has not ruled out deporting these men. This is not hypothetical, it's an abstract policy. These are real human beings whose lives are at risk. LGBTQ plus asylum seekers face some of the most terrifying circumstances imaginable, fleeing violence and persecution in their home countries, only to encounter an administration that refuses to see them as deserving protection. Organizers, including Lambda Legal and the ACLU, are working to support cases like this one. If you are in a position to support those organizations financially or through advocacy, please do, because some people, it's truly a matter of life and death. So this is your news for today on Monday, May the 11th. I want to thank you for showing up for this community, because listening, staying informed, and keeping your head in the game, even when the news is hard. This is an act of love and resistance, and don't forget that. If this show means something to you, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. I'll be back tomorrow with more LGBTQ plus news, and thanks so much for listening.